Welcome back, folks. Usually our friend Lance Robertson of plants.org brings us information about plants. Today we're focusing more on where those little plants live. Lance is here to talk about picking the right pot for your plant. Lance, good morning.
Good morning, Rosie. Great to be here.
You kind of wanted to flip subject matter on its head today, and you say to us, yes, the pot you choose really does matter. Let's talk about that.
Not only does it matter, sometimes nurseries play games because we have different needs than what the eventual user of the plant is going to do.
Good point.
So a lot of times people see all the little pots in the nurseries and think those are the pots I want to grow it in, and sometimes they can be, but sometimes it makes it a little more difficult when you're trying to do it at home and figure out what I should be doing when I want to grow plants, or how I should buy the plants in the pots.
Yeah, you bring up some really good points about like how I know nothing. You've got actually kind of an idea of a timeline moving across some of these beautiful plants. And by the way, guys, these are so sweet. This is watermelon. These are cherry tomatoes. Like, they're itty bitty guys right now, but it gives you a really good idea of how you should be planting them.
Yeah, so really what these show is kind of the growing cycle between plants. Of course, all plants are going to grow in a little bit different time scale. But these really show the watermelon are very new. They're something like 8 days old. You can barely see the roots through these clear containers. You wouldn't know if it had much roots if it was the normal black pot. As we move to the cherry tomatoes, you can start to see the roots coming in. They're starting to really grow. You know, most of the time we're going to thin these down, so these actually are going to last in these pots for another couple of weeks because really we want them to be kind of root bound before they go out.
Sure.
So as we start looking at the cucumber, you can start to see there's a lot of roots in there.
Well, and I can see, you know, from the top, if we couldn't see in, we're seeing a lot of leaf, but that still doesn't mean it's necessarily ready, right?
Right, so a lot of people want to move them as soon as they go to the true leaves. So a lot of plants have these dicot leaves. These are these little round leaves we see on almost every plant. It's actually how we split most plants from the grasses. They're called dicots. They're leaves that are inside the seeds. So once you see the next set of leaves, which are the true leaves, that's usually when people want to move them. I like to hold them a little longer because they really do need to grow as many roots as possible for as small a leaf number as they can.
I just learned so many things. That was incredible. Okay, and then this is actually corn.
This is corn, and it's ready to go. Grasses grow quick, so you can see these are coming out of the bottom of the container. The roots are starting to wrap in, but this is great. This is how we know that it's time to go. You'll see the bottom leaves are starting to have a little coloration. That's because we can't keep the water on them because the pots are becoming more roots than dirt. So this is definitely a signal to get them in the ground and they're ready to grow.
Well, and speaking of getting them in the ground, you say, you know, you buy, what is this, 12 of each of these things. It's really helpful to keep them in these little containers a little bit longer because you're going to end up with at least one going.
You're going to have one or two that dies. That's kind of the reason why we do this. You don't want to put in your garden seed spacing because even in professional nurseries, we're expecting 1% to die. And if you plant that, you're going to have blank spaces in your yard or in your garden. And while that may be okay, if you're really trying to grow food to help sustain you, you want to have every square foot really count when we talk about the full growing season.
So you'll know which ones are duds and which ones can be planted. Speaking of planting things, you brought begonias today. You told me you felt a little bit uncomfortable about it because here we're talking food and here we're just talking beauty. But what do you have to say?
We're talking beauty. I love begonias. I'm not going to say you shouldn't get begonias, but this is something I'm probably going to get some angry calls from nurseries about. Don't buy big begonias, and this goes probably true for most annuals. When you start seeing these plants and you're buying them in bigger sizes, really you're buying the same plants as the small sizes as far as counts and numbers. The difference sometimes for us is as little as 7 days between these.
Wow.
So, a couple of more leaves and they make the plants look much bigger, but where you could buy 6 plants in these little 6-packs, similar to these little grow trays that I have, for something like $3, if you get a bigger pot, you're not actually getting a lot more plant, and you're probably going to pay twice or sometimes even 3 times the price for it. So my suggestion is go for the smallest plant you can get when you're going for annuals because, again, they are going to grow very fast.
Well, and not only that, but you might make the mistake of taking this bigger guy and putting all 4 of them together and then winding up with a dead spot or 2.
So that is the problem. These are 4 plants that are shoved in a small pot. So it looks great if you're going to put this as a centerpiece somewhere and use it and let it die like some people might do, that's great. But if you're talking about long term, when this plant gets into July, these are 4 plants that are absolutely too close together. And more than likely, when you start to see 1 or 2 plants die in the summertime, it's because we can't keep enough water on them. It is Austin. It will be 100 degrees for a lot of days.
For a long time.
And too often I see these go in the ground and people get upset because in January they have some die and they don't realize if they'd have just bought these plants smaller and spread them out, it would look way better.
Oh, no. Okay, all right. Good information to know. In our last minute, let's just talk about some of these other little options.
So these are, again, just options, especially when you're starting plants by yourself. Starting them small sometimes is good, but a little bit more dirt does help levy the water.
Okay.
So if you're really bad about remembering I need to water every 12 hours or you don't have perfect irrigation set up like we might in a greenhouse, I really suggest using some of the bigger pots. The seeds aren't going to be hurt by any means. You're going to put them in the ground, which is the world as a pot. So bigger pots aren't always going to be bad, especially when you're talking about vegetables or annuals. This is really the way to go, and it will simplify kind of how often you have to see your plants or how often you have to take care of them. And even some options that are just easier to get out. You know, sometimes it's easier to put something like this in the ground than these little tiny guys. We worry about breaking the small ones. They can get a little bit bigger, so they're a little less fragile.
Okay, lots of good information today. We'll have to leave it there, Lance. Thank you so much, as always. All right, if you need help with a specific plant, you can reach out to Lance directly. Check out his website to learn more, plants.org, and increase your greenery knowledge by listening to his podcast, Good at Plants, Bad at Life.